Some stories get buried beneath the snow, but the land remembers. It remembers the night a girl came barefoot through the frost. Her feet split open like overripe fruit, breath thin as thread. Her dress was no thicker than a prayer, and the moon above gave no warmth, only light to watch her suffer. Silas Creed was finishing his evening chore when the dog stirred. Two old hounds, lazy most days, now growled low like they smelled something that didn't belong. He stepped off the porch, rifle in hand, his boots crunching against the hardened snow. At first he thought it was a trick of the wind, some ghost sound rolling down from the pines. Then he saw her, crumpled near the fence, half covered in frost and mud, her limbs stiff, one eye still open but not quite seeing. He knelt slowly, one knee clicking from old breaks that never healed right. "Well now," he muttered, brushing tangled hair from her cheek. "What in God's name happened to you?" The girl didn't answer. Couldn't. Her lips were cracked, hands curled tight like claws. A welt bloomed across her temple, half-healed and purpled with older bruises. Silas didn't ask questions then. He gathered her into his arms, coat wrapped around her birth-thin frame, and carried her inside as the wind whipped behind him. The fire had nearly died, but he threw on fresh logs and stoked it high, set her on the cot beside it, fetched clean water, a jar of honey, and the last clean quilt in the house. Her body shivered violently at first, then settled into a shallow, stubborn rhythm. Death had come close, but hadn't taken her yet. He warmed broth, coaxed a few spoonfuls past her lips. Her eyes fluttered open once, staring past him like she was looking for someone long gone. "Name?" he asked softly, but she only closed her eyes again. That night, Silas sat by the fire with the rifle across his lap. Snow tapped against the windows. He hadn't lit the outside lantern. Something told him it was best no one saw she was here. By morning, the fever had set in. She thrashed in her sleep, muttering nonsense, names, perhaps, or prayers. Once she gasped out, "Don't make me get in the wagon again." Silas said nothing. He just wiped her brow with cool cloths and kept the fire alive. On the third day, she woke fully. Her voice was sandpaper, but it held a flicker of defiance. "You gonna send me back?" "Back where?" Silas asked. Her eyes, gray and wary, narrowed. "Doesn't matter. They'll just dump me somewhere else." "I reckon you're dumped already." That earned him the ghost of a smirk, quick and bitter. "I'm Silas Creed," he said, sitting down with a cup of coffee gone cold. "This here's my ranch. Ain't much, but it's mine. You got a name?" She hesitated, then said, "Marybelle. Least that's what my ma called me, before she died." He nodded slowly. "Marybelle, then." They didn't speak much the rest of that day. She slept more, ate what he gave her, stared at the ceiling like it held secrets. Silas busied himself with work, keeping the noise down. In the evenings, he read aloud from the old Bible, not out of piety, but because his voice seemed to soothe her. On the 6th day, she tried to stand and collapsed. "You'll tear what little skin's left on your feet," he warned. "I can't sit here forever," she snapped. Silas raised an eyebrow. "Didn't say you could, but you ain't leaving neither, if that's what you're thinking." "I don't want charity." "This ain't charity. This is a place to be if you've got nowhere else." She looked away. "Then I guess it's mine now." A week later, she was helping carry logs. Her feet were wrapped tight, and she moved slow, but she didn't complain. She watched how Silas moved, how he spoke to the animals, how he never raised his voice unless it was to call in the dogs. She noticed he always limped worse in the cold, and that he never answered questions about the past. A man built for silence, she figured. Still, he watched her with something close to tenderness. Never pity. That's what kept her there. One morning, she stood on the porch wrapped in a patched wool coat 2 sizes too big, the wind tugging at her hair. She turned to him and asked, "Why'd you help me?" Silas didn't look up from chopping wood. "Because someone should have." She stared out across the land. "You think they'll come looking?" "Who?" "The ones who left me." He paused. "If they do, they'll wish they hadn't." It was a simple promise, but it was the first time in her life someone had promised anything at all. That night, she stood at the window while he cleaned an old rifle she'd seen him unearth from under a floorboard. It wasn't the same one he hunted with. This one was older, heavier, stained. You used that before. He nodded. A long time ago. For what? Silas gave her a look that carried too many years. Justice. Sometimes regret. She didn't ask more. But she slept with a knife under her pillow from then on. Not out of fear. Out of readiness. There was peace for a while. Not happiness, not exactly. But peace. Until one morning, they found hoof prints near the lower fence. Fresh ones, too many for strays. A symbol carved into the bark of a cottonwood. 3 long slashes, deep and deliberate. Silas stared at it for a long time. Marybelle watched him from the saddle of the old roan. Is it trouble? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, You ever used a gun? I know how. Good, he said, walking back toward the house. Don't hesitate. She followed him, the wind curling through the canyon, like it was whispering something old and mean. And for the first time since that night in the snow, the cold didn't touch her. The air changed before the sky did. Birds stopped their morning calls. Even the hounds, restless since dawn, lay still beneath the porch with ears back and eyes sharp. It was as if the land itself had taken a breath and was holding it. Silas sat at the kitchen table, cleaning the revolver he hadn't touched in years. Not the rifle. This was smaller, meant for quicker decisions. His movements were slow, deliberate, the way a man handles something he once swore never to use again. Marybelle stood by the window, the morning light brushing against her face like the memory of something softer. Her jaw was set, eyes scanning the ridgeline where the trees thinned. You think it's the McKinnon gang? Silas didn't answer. He finished oiling the cylinder and slid the revolver into its worn leather holster. Could be someone worse. They the ones who put that mark on the tree. Don't know, but whoever left it wanted to be seen. She turned toward him. And what do you want to do? I want to finish my breakfast, he said, lifting his coffee. But I suppose that's a luxury for men without ghosts. Outside, the sky stretched wide and hard above the canyon, pale blue with a sharpness that promised wind. The wind was coming, not the kind that rustled leaves, but the kind that tore roofs off and left dust in your lungs. Marybelle pulled the saddle tight on the old roan. She hadn't ridden much before arriving, but Silas taught her more in a few weeks than the orphan house had taught her in 10 years. She rode like someone with something to lose now. You don't have to be out front for this, Silas said, emerging from the barn with his rifle strapped to his back. And hide, she said, mounting the horse. Not again. He watched her for a long moment, then nodded once. They rode the perimeter of the ranch in silence, eyes drawn to the places a man could crawl through wire, to where footprints might linger if you knew how to look. At the southern edge, just beyond the fence, a deer carcass lay torn and half buried in snow. Not shot, ripped open, and not by animal teeth. Marybelle knelt beside it. They're close. Silas scanned the treeline. They're watching, probably wondering if we'll run. Are we? He turned back to the ranch, smoke curling up from the chimney, like it did no fear. No. We've got 1 day, maybe 2. Use it. That afternoon, she practiced shooting. Ken's lined the fence post. Her hands trembled on the first shot, but by the 6th, the tremble was gone. She was faster than she expected. Silas watched from the porch, saying nothing. Did you teach someone else once? She asked, reloading. He didn't look at her. I had a daughter. Marybelle stopped moving. The air between them grew thin. She died, she asked softly. He nodded. Years ago. Fever took her before I could. Her mother, too. I'm sorry. Silas's eyes stayed on the horizon. You remind me of her. Not your face. Your fight. Marybelle swallowed hard, then picked up the pistol again. That night, she didn't sleep. Neither did he. They sat by the fire, the house too quiet for comfort. Wind tapped the shutters, and somewhere beyond the canyon, a wolf howled once and was silent. Every creak in the wood felt like footsteps. They'll come at dawn, Silas said finally. Men like that want to see their work in daylight. Marybelle nodded. Then we'll meet them in the light. Before the sun rose, they took positions. Silas stayed near the barn where the hay bales formed a decent wall. Marybelle crouched near the fence, rifle braced. A clear line of sight toward the trail that cut through the pines. The snow had melted just enough to leave the ground slick and muddy. That would slow horses. Maybe by them seconds. Seconds were everything now. The first rider came at sunrise. A silhouette against the orange sky, leisurely. Like he was just out for a morning trot. But then came two more behind him, then four. All in dark coats. One wore a red scarf that flapped like a warning. They look like they're trying to be seen. Marybelle whispered through clenched teeth. They want to scare us. Silas said, Don't let them. As the riders neared, the man with the red scarf raised a hand. They stopped at the fence line, not 50 yards from her. She could smell the horses, the sweat, the smoke from a campfire still clinging to their coats. The leader leaned forward in his saddle. We're looking for a girl, he called out. Young, brown hair, walks with a limp. Marybelle didn't move. She ran off from a man who paid good money to own her. The leader went on, smiling now. And we aim to return what's his. Silas stepped forward, rifle in hand, but not raised. Ain't no one like that here. The leader tilted his head. Then I suppose we'll have to check. Won't take long. You take one step past that fence, Silas said, voice low as thunder, and I'll send you to meet the devil you're working for. The smile faded. For a moment, the only sound was wind scraping across the frozen earth. Then the man with the red scarf spat. You're going to regret this. He turned his horse. They rode off without another word. But they didn't ride far. Back inside, Marybelle leaned her rifle against the wall. Her hand shook again. Tomorrow, she asked. Silas nodded. Or tonight. And outside, the wind howled again. Not the voice of wolves this time, but of something colder. Something coming. The night cracked open with the sharp echo of breaking glass. Silas was already on his feet, rifle raised, before the final shards hit the floor. A lantern had burst against the side of the barn, flames licking the wood like hungry tongues. Outside, horses screamed. Then came the gunshots, sharp, measured, deliberate. The McKinnon gang wasn't charging. They were surrounding. Marybelle didn't wait for orders. She grabbed her pistol and bolted for the back door. The cold slapped her face like a wet rag, but her fingers stayed steady. She slipped into the shadows behind the chicken coop, boots sinking into the crust of half-frozen mud. Smoke curled across the yard. The fire was spreading. Silas moved like an old mountain lion, slow but powerful, crouched behind the wagon. When the first outlaw darted toward the main house, he dropped him with a single shot. The man fell hard, his scream muffled by snow. One down. They're trying to box us in. Marybelle shouted, ducking behind the corral fence. Bullets whipped past her ear, splintering wood. Hold the line. Silas yelled back. Make him earn every inch. Another outlaw crept along the fence. Marybelle waited, heart banging like a drum, until his shoulder cleared the post. Then she fired. He jerked back and collapsed with a grunt. The shape didn't move again. She crouched low, adrenaline singing through her veins. The last time she'd run from men like this, she'd been barefoot and starving, hiding in root cellars and haylofts. This time, she had steel in her hands and someone beside her who believed she was worth standing for. The barn crackled louder. Flames burst through the roof in a spray of sparks. Two horses tore free of their stalls, charging into the field, their panic leaving a churned trail behind them. From behind the well, Silas picked off another man. But there were more now, at least 6 still moving, fanning out. One lobbed a bottle over the fence. It smashed near the porch, fire blooming instantly. Marybelle, he called. Back to the house. We hold there. She ran, zigzagging, the cold biting through her shirt. A bullet grazed her arm. She stumbled but didn't fall. Inside, she threw the bolt across the door just as Silas followed, smoke curling around his coat. They slid to the floor, backs to the wall, breathing hard. We got maybe 10 minutes before they pushed through, Silas muttered. Then we make 10 minutes feel like an hour, she said. He looked at her, this girl who had arrived with frostbitten toes and eyes too old for her face, and nodded. They took positions. Maribel crouched by the window, rifle propped on the sill. Silas stayed by the doorway, revolver drawn. The flames cast shifting shadows across the room. The floorboards groaned like they remembered violence. Outside, footsteps crunched closer. A shadow moved against the firelight. Then the door exploded inward. Silas fired point-blank, sending the first man flying back into the snow. The second lunged through, slashing with a knife. Maribel screamed, firing from the hip. The bullet struck the outlaw's thigh. He buckled, snarling, before Silas clubbed him with the butt of the revolver. Another silhouette appeared in the window. Maribel turned and fired, shattering glass and skull alike. The smoke was thick now. Coughing, eyes burning, Silas dragged a small crate across the door. "They'll burn us out if we stay." "I'll cover the back," she said, racing toward the kitchen. A shot rang out. The wall behind her spat splinters. She dropped, rolled, and crawled to the stove. Another outlaw was breaking through the rear door with a crowbar. She waited until the man pushed halfway in. Then she rose like a storm, jamming her rifle barrel under his chin. He froze. "You ain't worth the powder," she whispered, and cracked him over the head with the stock instead. His body dropped with a dull thud. Silas joined her. "They're falling apart." They didn't expect to fight. He stared at her, soaked in blood, eyes like burning coals. "You remind me less of my daughter now." She tensed. "You remind me more of her mother." The wind outside changed pitch. The last of the flames hissed under a sleet of sudden snow. Then came silence. Not peace, just the pause of wolves before a final charge. A voice rose from beyond the yard. "You're surrounded. You give us the girl, we let you live." Maribel stood in the open doorway, rifle at her side. "You're gonna have to come and take me." Silas raised his head. "If you can." The man stepped forward, a hulking figure with a red scarf wrapped twice around his throat. "Last chance, old man." Silas raised his revolver. "Then you better send someone younger." A moment's pause. Then they charged. 3 of them. Maybe 4. The smoke twisted around them like ghosts. Maribel fired, dropped one. Silas shot another through the gut. The third made it to the steps, until the girl tackled him, slamming him into the railing with a strength born of fury. The man thrashed, knife glinting. She caught his wrist, forced it down, then jammed her thumb into his eye. He screamed, but she didn't stop. She didn't stop until he was still. Then it was quiet. Snow fell again, light, lazy flakes drifting through the open doorway like ash after a storm. The fire had died. The smoke had cleared, and the bodies lay where they fell, red against white. Maribel sat on the porch steps, breathing hard. Blood soaked her sleeve. Her lip was split, but her eyes were alive. Alive and unbroken. Silas limped out, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You did it." "We did it," she said, voice hoarse. He nodded slowly, surveying the yard. "You sure you don't want to run?" She looked out at the snow, the ranch, the distant trees. "This time I'm staying." He smiled, not wide but real. "Then I reckon we build something worth guarding."